Oh, finally. Okay, let's hope this is actually working because StreamYard was giving me messages that I was unable to go live because there was a high volume. I actually posted a picture over in the lifeboat just to prove it. Right now, I'm looking over at my YouTube on my phone to see if this is actually happening on YouTube. See if it comes up or not. Nope, it says it's waiting for Primal Scream, and yet I am live. But there is a delay, so we shall see. Well, if anybody happens to be out there, I can see if somebody is or isn't. It says 0 right now, which means there's nobody, which is fine. It can just be me. Because this will record. See if somebody is or isn't. It says 0 right now, which means there's it's there. It's there at least a little bit. You probably heard it in the background. Hopefully it didn't create too much feedback. So this will be recorded. So if nobody shows up, that's okay too. Because maybe somebody will watch it on the replay. Sorry, I keep messing with my hair, but it has been a day. There's a reason I wanted to do this yesterday on Wednesday evening instead of today on Thursday evening. My hair is still damp from washing it. Because I had a job today with my organizing business, got sweaty and icky hair, so I had to take a shower. So I will be looking down at notes some of the time, so please don't be offended by that. I will do my best not to do it too much, but I do have to read some things because I want to make sure that the information I'm giving you is accurate and that I don't misspeak on something. So for anybody who's never been to my channel, which is pretty much everybody in the world, my name is Allison, and I am a certified health educator. I have a master's degree in health education and behavior. I'm not a nurse, have never wanted to be one. I've spent my entire career working with seniors for the most part in various ways. I did social services and skilled nursing. I did social services in home health. I've done sales and marketing for independent living, assisted living, skilled nursing, home health. I've done recreational therapy, which is what health education came from in mental health settings, primarily with seniors, but also with all ages when I was working in mental health. But I kind of specialized in the senior population. So I've been doing this for a long time in one way or another. The last 8 years, I was the manager of a senior wellness community center for a local hospital system. It included 2 local hospitals. And with that, we did health education. We had things like yoga, tai chi, ballroom dance, line dance available for our membership to be able to be physically active. And then we also provided free to the community educational series by doctors, by nurses, nurse practitioners, other healthcare providers, therapists, physical therapists, things like that. So I have been doing health education for nearly 10 years now. So that's me, and that's what I do. And one of the reasons I wanted to do a video on CHF and genetics is because people think that most people out in the world, excuse me, who are not involved with CHF or maybe new to it, think that it's all their lifestyle. It all has to do with what they've been eating and living, how they've been living their lives. And while that is true, that is very much a large portion of how CHF can develop, there are genetic components as well. Excuse me, break for a sip of water. All right. So genetics do actually play a role. So I wanted to talk about some of that. So again, I'm going to refer to my notes, and we're going to get into some details on a couple of things because it gets kind of in the weeds with medical terminology, and I want to try to explain some of that. So the number one kind of genetic role that we see is your family history. So if there is a family history of heart disease, especially if a close relative like a parent or a grandparent has had any kind of heart disease, that's a genetic risk factor for you to also be at risk for heart failure. So your family history is kind of one of the most important things. Another one is just genetic mutations. So there are different genetic variations that can exist that will affect how your heart functions. So it can make you more susceptible to developing heart failure, just like your family history can. So when we talk about genetic mutations, I know we've all heard of DNA. We typically hear of that in conjunction with law enforcement and criminal activity, right? But DNA is, as you know, is the building block of our bodies and our cells. And on your DNA are what are called genes. And genes can mutate over time as you pass genes from one generation to the next. A gene can just change a little bit, or a little bit here and a little bit there, and the next generation another little bit, and it can mutate from what it was initially. So there are gene mutations that can happen that may make you more susceptible to developing heart failure, even if there's no family history of it. So just because there is no family history doesn't mean that you may not be susceptible. It's just another factor that could play in. So, inherited cardiomyopathies. So, there are heart conditions like hypertrophic cardiomyopathy or dilated cardiomyopathy that can be inherited. Again, kind of a family thing that can lead to heart failure. Doesn't always, but it can. So if you've ever heard the word cardiomyopathy given to you by your cardiologist or healthcare provider in relation to your diagnoses, then you are potentially more susceptible for developing heart failure at some future point if you have not already. Metabolic disorders. So there are just some genetic disorders that affect your metabolism, such as hypercholesterolemia, easy for me to say, which just means high cholesterol. We all know that diet can have effect on cholesterol, but believe it or not, there's a high genetic component to cholesterol. So if you have parents who, or a parent who has always had historically high cholesterol, even when they eat the proper diet for that, then that is a genetic thing. It's not something that you can fix with diet. You can mitigate to a certain extent, but you can't necessarily fix it. I'm going to give an example. My mother, she is 85 years old. She has genetic high cholesterol. There was a point where she was eating vegetarian twice a week. She was eating chicken and fish the rest of the time. She was doing all the things. She was not eating processed food. She wasn't doing any, she was literally doing what she needed to do. And yet she still had high cholesterol. And her doctors basically came to the conclusion it's genetic for her. And we don't know with her parents, who are long deceased, if there was any kind of history there, they may not have even been testing for cholesterol when they were still alive. That was many, many years ago. But there is a genetic component. So they don't even treat her with a statin. She's 85 years old, and they just are like, we don't need to do that. It's not, you've been fine with it so far. She's never had a stroke. She's never had a heart attack. She doesn't have heart failure. So she's just going to have high cholesterol. But for some people that maybe have inherited that tendency to have a high cholesterol, that can be a factor that weighs in on developing heart failure in the future. All right, so something called channelopathies, or it's channelopathies. That's how it actually is spelled. But what that basically means is abnormalities in the ion channels of the heart that can disrupt its electrical activity and increase the likelihood of heart failure. If you know what heart failure is, and we didn't define that, so just kind of the most simple definition of heart failure is, for some reason, your heart has stopped pumping efficiently and is not pumping blood out to the rest of your body the way it's supposed to, including to itself. And so it is now, what's happening is the fluid and the blood are collecting in different parts of your body. It might be your feet, your ankles, your legs. It might be in your chest cavity around your heart. So or in your lungs. That's why it's called congestive heart failure. Things are getting congested with the fluid. So if there's a disruption in the electrical process of your heart, which is what makes your heart pump, right, then that can also be a factor that can play into developing heart failure. Inherited syndromes. So there's certain genetic syndromes that are rare that can affect your heart structure and your heart function that could lead to heart failure. So any person that's born with some kind of heart abnormality in the structure of their heart, for example, the way their atrium or their ventricles are shaped, or maybe if there's a hole between atria or ventricles that has not been closed up, that kind of a thing. So that can also potentially lead to heart failure down the road because your heart's going to be working a little bit harder than it should. Mitochondrial DNA mutations. So mutations in your mitochondrial DNA can impair energy production in heart cells, which may contribute to heart failure. So that one was like, you know what, let's kind of dive into that a little bit. So let me see if I can do a share screen on this mitochondrial DNA. Give me 1 second, because I'm working in my backstage here. Present, share screen. I have to pick it. Window, this one. Share. Okay, let me see if I'm sharing. I'm sharing. Awesome. All right, so I have to go back over to this page because I can't see it. All right, so mitochondrial DNA mutations. I don't know if you guys can see this or not. So your mitochondrial DNA is the DNA that you inherit through your mother's line. It's always passed from mother to child, and it is truly the basis for much of our genetic code. So there are certain things that can affect the mitochondrial DNA and can mutate it. So sometimes it can just be a weird, random, wild mutation, but there are things that we can do or that we do that can affect the mitochondrial DNA. And if we don't do certain things, then we can maybe not trigger that kind of a mutation. So you can see right here, it's diet and lifestyle factors. Now, I know we're talking about genetics, but something you need to understand is your genetics are your genetics, but your lifestyle can flip switches within your genetics. If you think of it kind of like a toggle switch or a light switch, on or off, there are things you can do to flip switches within your DNA to trigger that gene issue to be expressed. So, for example, this is going to be very oversimplified and it's not accurate, but let's say there's a toggle switch between blue eyes and brown eyes. And if the switch is off, you have brown eyes. If the switch is blue up, you have blue eyes. So let's say that everybody's born with the switch up in the blue position, because I think babies tend to have blue eyes. But at some point, something happens to express the brown gene by flipping that switch. That's really not how it happens with eyes, but that's just the best way I can kind of explain it, that there are switches within your gene makeup that turn on and off. And if it's turned on, it'll express whatever that tendency is, a good one or a bad one. So let's say you do have a tendency for heart failure or for other heart disease. If you have certain lifestyle issues that are not the healthiest, they are going to trigger those genes to expressing the not healthy things, such as developing heart failure. So your nutrient intake, so certain nutrients like antioxidants that are found in fruits and vegetables can help reduce or oxidative stress and protect against damage to your mitochondrial DNA. On the other side of that, if you eat a diet higher in processed foods, sugar, and unhealthy fats, that might increase your oxidative stress and potentially contribute to that switch being flipped and a mitochondrial DNA mutation. So the next one is calorie intake. Caloric restriction or consuming fewer calories than usual without going into malnutrition has been associated with improved mitochondrial function and reduced oxidative damage to your mitochondrial DNA in some studies. So they're just saying it's in some studies. Hasn't been completely proven yet through studies, but some studies are showing that. But on the other hand, if you eat too much and have too much of a caloric intake, if there's obesity going on with you, that can increase the oxidative stress and inflammation, potentially leading to that mutation of the mitochondrial DNA. You're going to hear inflammation a couple of times, maybe more than that. Inflammation is a huge, huge factor in your health. People have no idea how much inflammation actually does affect everything with your health. Just going back to COVID-19, one of the things that they found was in the early stages of COVID-19, if you could get a handle on the inflammation and kind of get that inflammation down using something like a steroid like prednisone, then, and even some in the middle to late stages, but you could mitigate that COVID from becoming necessarily fatal or very devastating. Obesity is linked to inflammation. They have done enough studies now to prove that. So you remember that obese people were one of the high-risk groups. Another high-risk group is people that are elderly. Guess what is increased in elderly people just by nature of them being elderly? Inflammation. And now you can see here on the screen that we're saying again, if you're obese or you have too much of a caloric intake, you are increasing the oxidative stress in your body and inflammation, and both of those can lead to mutating that mitochondrial DNA. Exercise, regular physical activity, excuse me, has been shown to enhance mitochondrial function and reduce that oxidative stress. You can also stimulate mitochondrial biogenesis, which is the process by which new mitochondria are formed, which can help dilute the effects of those DNA mutations of the mitochondria. So exercise again is important. There's a reason that your doctors or your practitioners are telling you, if you are a heart failure patient, that you need to watch your diet, you need to watch your salt intake, you need to get some exercise. There's a reason. They're not saying it just to be a pain in your tuchus. They're saying it because these studies have been proven to show that these things do affect your heart failure and how quickly it may progress in you. If you can reverse some things potentially, depending on your genetics. Again, genetics plays a key role. Environmental toxins, some lifestyle factors such as smoking, exposure to air pollution, and certain chemicals can increase that oxidative stress and the damage to the mitochondrial DNA, which could lead again to mutations. Stress, this is a big one. Chronic stress, right? Chronic stress can contribute to oxidative stress and inflammation in the body, which might increase the risk of the mutations in the mitochondrial DNA. So again, we're talking about that inflammation, right? So keeping your stress levels down can help mitigate that. So while diet and lifestyle factors can influence the cellular environment and affect mitochondrial health, their direct impact on causing these mutations may not be as pronounced as other factors like aging or a genetic predisposition. However, adopting a healthy lifestyle that includes a balanced diet, regular exercise, stress management, and avoidance of harmful substances can help support mitochondrial function and overall health, potentially reducing the risk of mitochondrial DNA mutations and associated health issues. So, as you can see, there is a strong genetic component, but your lifestyle does have some impact on triggering those genes, whether they're going to turn on or off, or whether you're going to mutate the DNA or not. So, there you go. Next factor is what's called epigenetic factors. So, I'm going to read this because this is quite long, and it's not super complicated, but I want to make sure I get it right. So epigenetic factors are like molecular switches, we talked about this already, that can turn genes on and off without changing the underlying DNA sequence. So the DNA stays the same, but the switch goes on and off to say whether the gene is expressed or not expressed. Imagine your DNA as a book containing all the instructions for building and maintaining your body. Epigenetic factors are like the bookmarks or highlights in that book, indicating which parts should be read and used by your cells. These bookmarks can be influenced by various factors such as your environment, lifestyle, and experiences. Just as a bookmark can direct you to specific pages in a book, epigenetic factors can control which genes are active or silent in your cells. These changes can impact your health and how your body responds to different conditions. Understanding epigenetics helps us grasp how our choices and our environment can influence our genes and overall well-being. Understanding these genetic components can help you tailor your treatment plan and lifestyle adjustments to manage your condition effectively. It's essential to discuss your family history and any concerns with your healthcare provider for personalized guidance. So again, you're going to hear this a lot. I'm not a doctor, and I'm not somebody. I can help you find information. I can help give you information, but I am not an expert in the way that a doctor is, especially a cardiologist who specializes in congestive heart failure. So just be aware that there are genetic components that can affect whether you'll have a predisposition for heart failure or not, but you also have some control over whether some of those genetic components are expressed or not. And that's with your lifestyle. And if we continue this series, which we may or may not, because still have nobody here, but that's okay. But if we continue this series, we will talk about some of these things in depth. And I would love to have people on just to be in and ask questions. And if I don't have the answer, we'll look them up. I know how to look up the answers the right way and from reputable sources. So we're not talking to Dr. Google. I don't really use Google anyway. I use a search engine called Bing. I sometimes use Chat GPT just because it can sometimes summarize things a little better for me, and then I can, if I need to look at something more specific, I can go and, or if I want to make sure something is accurate, I can look it up. But I know what the reputable sources are to get the information. So and that's a hard thing to kind of sift through. Sometimes even WebMD is not the most credible source. I will often use Cleveland Clinic and or Mayo. Those are kind of my two go-tos. And any of the associations that are nonprofit that have a .org website are typically not trying to get you to buy anything. So they have nothing to gain or lose. They're just they fundraise. Yes, I'm not going to say they don't, but they're not trying to get you to buy their product or to buy their medication or whatever it is, or use the medication that they recommend. They're not doing that. So um, those are the sources I usually go to. So we can always look the answers up together and make sure that you have a good source for that and get some accurate information. I also like to use, I know I said I don't use Google. I do use Google Scholar because sometimes I like to look up the latest studies that are related to this. So maybe we have some information at Cleveland Clinic or at Mayo, but we want to see if there's any more recent studies, because they may be citing a study from 10 years ago in their material. So I like to go to Google Scholar just to look up to see if there's anything out there that's maybe newer information. So anyway, if you're watching this on the replay, if anybody ever watches this, please leave a comment. Let me know that you were here. If you have a question, let me know. If you would like to send me an email, it's allison.primalscream, the name of the channel, at gmail.com, allison.primalscream@gmail.com. If you have a suggestion for a topic related to heart failure, or really anything, let me know, and we can work on trying to get something together for that. So I'm kind of sad that nobody showed up because we had to move it from Wednesday. I know a couple of people were planning to watch Wednesday and couldn't today. So there's that. But maybe somebody will watch it on the replay and have some questions or some comments that they would like to make. I would love to hear from you. So please do that. If you like what you see today, please push that like button. And if you would like to subscribe, I would love that. I would love to get my subscriber count up. I'm kind of stuck at 73, which I don't really do much on here, but I'm going to start doing more. Hopefully we'll get the subscriber count up. I'm trying to get to 100, and then we'll try to get to 500, and we'll have little goals along the way. But anyway, hope you enjoyed this if you were able to watch it, and let me know if you have any questions, concerns, or comments, and maybe we'll see you on the next one.